Your position is no longer available, Mrs. Mercer. Unfortunately, plans have changed. I felt my entire body go cold, like someone had replaced my blood with ice water. The HR director's face on my laptop screen showed exactly zero emotion as she delivered the news that would destroy everything I'd spent the last 3 months building. 3 months of packing, of promising my kids everything would be okay, of convincing my husband this move was our future. My name is Leanne Mercer. I'm 37 years old, and exactly 4 days after moving my entire family, 2,800 miles across the country, the job I was promised vanished with a single sentence. Before I continue with how this nightmare unfolded, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you haven't already. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. I remember sitting there in our half-unpacked rental house, surrounded by boxes labeled in my careful handwriting, kitchen, Noah's bedroom, Ellie's books, staring at this woman who looked uncomfortable but not nearly uncomfortable enough for what she was doing to my life. I don't understand, I said, my voice coming out embarrassingly small. I signed a contract. We sold our house in Portland. My husband resigned from his practice. We enrolled our children in schools here. She cleared her throat. Helix Dynamics has undergone some restructuring decisions. The integration team is being downsized before it's even formed. Legal has advised we can terminate within the probationary period. You'll receive 2 weeks severance as a courtesy. A courtesy. 2 weeks of salary as a courtesy after we'd uprooted our entire lives to move from Oregon to North Carolina. Can I speak with Marcus? I asked, referring to the CTO who'd recruited me, who'd spent months convincing me that my expertise in healthcare data integration was exactly what they needed for their expanding medical records division. Marcus is no longer with the company, she said flatly. That's when I understood. This wasn't just about me. This was a company in free fall, cutting costs wherever they could. I was collateral damage in someone else's financial planning. I wish I could tell you I stood up for myself, that I threatened legal action or demanded proper compensation, but shock does strange things to you. Instead, I actually thanked her, for letting me know. I wished her well and disconnected the call. Then I walked into our bathroom, turned on the shower, sat down on the tile floor, and sobbed until the water ran cold. How was I going to tell Chris? My husband had given up his physical therapy practice of 12 years, his patients, his colleagues, the clinic he'd helped build from nothing, all because I'd convinced him that this opportunity at Helix was worth it. It's a director-level position, I'd told him. The salary's enough that you can take your time finding the right practice here, maybe even start your own. And our kids. God, our kids. Noah was 15 and already hated me for making him leave his friends before his sophomore year. Ellie was 8 and struggling with dyscalculia, a math learning disability that had taken us 2 years to get properly diagnosed and accommodated at her old school. We'd been assured the private school here in Raleigh had resources for her. The tuition deposit alone was non-refundable at $3,800. I sat on that cold bathroom floor for what felt like hours, my mind racing through calculations. Our savings would cover maybe 3 months if we were careful. The housing market in Portland had exploded after we sold. We couldn't afford to go back even if we wanted to. Chris couldn't get his old job back. They'd already hired his replacement. I heard the front door open. Chris was back from taking the kids to tour their new schools. Lee, you home? His voice echoed through our hollow rental. I shut off the shower and caught my reflection in the mirror. Eyes swollen, face blotchy. There was no hiding this. When I told them, Chris just sat down heavily on one of our kitchen boxes. He didn't say anything for a long time. Noah kicked the wall hard enough to leave a dent we'd never get back from our security deposit. Ellie crawled into my lap and asked if this meant we could go home. I didn't have the heart to tell her we didn't have a home to go back to. That night, after the kids were asleep, Chris and I sat on our mattress on the floor. We hadn't even set up our bed frame yet. "What are we going to do?" he asked, staring at the ceiling. I'd spent the afternoon sending desperate emails to my network, updating my LinkedIn, and applying to every remotely relevant position in the Raleigh area. "I'll find something else," I said, with more confidence than I felt. "I have interviews lined up already." This was technically true. One interview, with a company that paid 40% less than what Helix had promised. And if you don't? He asked. I didn't answer. We both knew what retail and food service jobs paid. We both knew what Ellie's special education needs cost. We both knew how thin our safety net was stretched. The next morning, I did something I'm not proud of. I drove to Helix Dynamics' gleaming headquarters, the building I'd toured just 4 months ago, where I'd met the team I would never lead, where Marcus had shown me the corner office that would have been mine. I sat in the parking lot for almost an hour, rehearsing what I would say if I marched in there demanding to speak to whoever was in charge now. I imagined myself being firm but professional. I imagined them realizing their terrible mistake. I imagined a lot of things that would never happen. In the end, I didn't go in. Instead, I drove to a coffee shop and spent 6 hours applying for jobs, making connections, and fighting the rising panic that threatened to drown me. 3 weeks passed. The rejections piled up. Overqualified, not quite the right fit. Went with an internal candidate. Chris found part-time work at a rehab center. Barely enough to cover groceries. Noah stopped speaking to me entirely. Ellie's new school called about adjustment concerns. Then I got the call from Daria Novak at Meridian Health Systems, Helix's biggest competitor. I heard what happened, she said. Helix is a mess right now. Half their leadership team has jumped ship. I noticed, I said dryly. We have a position that might interest you. Not director level, but senior manager. The compensation package is competitive. It was 15% less than what Helix had offered, but 30% more than anything else I'd found. I scheduled the interview for the following day. That same evening, my phone lit up with a North Carolina number I didn't recognize. Is this Leanne Mercer? A man's voice, tense and tired. Yes, who's calling? James Alderson, CEO of Helix Dynamics. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. Mr. Alderson, what can I do for you? I've just learned about your situation, the termination of your contract. He sounded genuinely uncomfortable. I want to personally apologize. This should never have happened. I appreciate that, I said carefully, not giving him anything. The fact is, Mrs. Mercer, we're in a difficult position. The Medicore conversion project is 6 weeks behind schedule. The client is threatening to pull out entirely. Our interim integration director doesn't understand the proprietary architecture and the documentation is insufficient. I almost laughed. I knew exactly what he was talking about. Marcus and I had discussed the Medicore project extensively. It was a $40 million contract to migrate a regional hospital network's patient data to Helix's platform. It was also the main reason they'd recruited me. I'd done similar migrations 3 times before. That sounds challenging, I said, my voice neutral. We'd like to bring you on as a consultant to help navigate this situation. Premium rates, of course. Triple your original salary, prorated for the 8-week project duration. Now I did laugh. A short, sharp sound that made him pause. Mr. Alderson, 4 weeks ago, your company left my family financially devastated and emotionally shattered. My 15-year-old son isn't speaking to me. My 8-year-old daughter cries herself to sleep. My husband gave up a 12-year career. And now you want me to bail you out of a crisis I specifically warned Marcus about during my interviews? Silence on the line. Then, I understand your frustration. No, you don't, I cut in. But thank you for the offer. I wish you the best of luck with Medicore. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped my phone. Chris looked up from the job listings he'd been scrolling through. Who was that? Helix, I said. They need help with Medicore. His eyes widened. What did you tell them? I told them no. Lee, he ran his hands through his hair. We need the money. I have an interview with Meridian tomorrow. And if that doesn't pan out, we have 6 weeks of mortgage payments left before we're completely underwater. He was right, but something had crystallized inside me during that call. A cold, clear certainty. I'm not helping them, I said. Not after what they did. Chris didn't argue further, but I could see the worry lines deepening around his eyes. I barely slept that night. By morning, I'd made a decision that would either save us or sink us completely. The interview with Meridian went well. Daria was sharp, direct, and clearly valued my experience. But when she asked if I had any questions, I took a deep breath and stepped off a cliff. Actually, I'm considering starting my own consultancy, I said. Would Meridian be open to contracting with an independent firm rather than hiring me directly? Daria studied me for a long moment. Potentially. What services would your firm provide? Specialized integration of healthcare data systems, migration management, compliance oversight. The same expertise you'd be hiring me for, but with more flexibility for both parties. And this firm exists? As of this morning, I slid my newly printed business card across the table. Nexus Integration Solutions. I'd stayed up until 3 a.m. registering the business, creating a simple website, and designing those cards at a 24-hour print shop. It was a gamble so massive it made my stomach hurt. Daria picked up the card, her expression unreadable. Bold move, Leanne. It's either bold or desperate, I admitted. I'm not sure which yet. She actually smiled at that. Let me discuss this with my team. A consultancy arrangement might solve several issues for us, especially given Helix's current difficulties. As I drove home, my phone rang again. James Alderson. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. The fourth time, I answered. Mrs. Mercer, please reconsider. The Medicor situation is deteriorating. We're prepared to offer you a permanent position, director level, with a significant signing bonus to compensate for the disruption. Mr. Alderson, I said calmly, I'm no longer available for employment offers. However, my consultancy, Nexus Integration Solutions, might be able to assist you. Our standard rate for crisis intervention is $400 per hour, with a minimum commitment of 200 hours. The silence on his end was deafening. That's more than double what we were offering. Yes, I agreed. It is, and I require 50% upfront, non-refundable. If you're interested, I can have a contract to you this afternoon. If not, I wish you the best with Medicor. This feels punitive, Mrs. Mercer. Not at all, I said, my voice honey-sweet. This is simply the market rate for solving the problem you created. My family has expenses. My business has overhead. You're welcome to find another solution if mine doesn't work for you. I hung up and pulled into our driveway, my heart hammering. Had I just destroyed our last chance at financial recovery? Or had I finally found a way to take back control? Inside, Chris was waiting, his face tense. How did it go with Meridian? I set my purse down carefully. I told them I'm starting my own company. His expressions cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something close to anger. You did what? And Helix just called again. I told them they could hire my company at $400 an hour. Lee, his voice cracked. Have you lost your mind? We can't afford to gamble like this. I know it sounds crazy, I said, taking his hands. But think about it. They're desperate. Medicor is their biggest client. If they lose this contract, they'll be in serious trouble. And I'm the only one who can fix their problem in time. And if they say no, then Meridian might become my first client instead. Daria seemed interested. Chris pulled his hands away, pacing our small living room. This is our lives you're gambling with. Our children's security. I know, I whispered. But I can't go back to working for people who treated us like we were disposable. I can't. My phone buzzed with an email. From James Alderson. We accept your terms. Contract needed ASAP. Medicor representatives arriving Monday. I showed the email to Chris, whose eyes widened. They actually agreed to $400 an hour? They did. I felt lightheaded. That's $80,000 for 6 weeks of work. If you deliver, he reminded me. I will. I'd never been more certain of anything. And this is just the beginning. Chris stared at me like he was seeing someone new. Maybe he was. Maybe I was becoming someone new. Someone who wouldn't be broken by betrayal but instead would rebuild something stronger from the pieces. That night, I sat at our kitchen table drafting the contract that would either save us or become evidence of my hubris. I included clauses about intellectual property, scope limitations, payment schedules. I was creating armor, protecting myself from ever being vulnerable to these people again. My phone buzzed with another email. this time from Daria at Meridian. Proposal approved. Can you meet Thursday to discuss specifics? Particularly interested in your insights on Helix's Metacore implementation? I stared at the screen, a plan crystallizing in my mind. Not revenge, exactly. Something more elegant. Something that would transform the power dynamic permanently. I was going to make myself essential to both companies. I was going to build my consultancy on the very expertise that Helix had discarded. And I was going to make sure they never forgot the woman they thought they could simply erase. I woke up the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt since before the move. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel that crushing weight on my chest, that sense of drowning while everyone watched. Instead, I felt something unfamiliar, a cold, precise focus. I spent that entire day working out exactly how to thread this needle. Helix needed me to save their Metacore project, their biggest client, a hospital network whose entire patient database needed migration to their system. Meridian wanted insights on Helix's architecture, not quite industrial espionage, but dancing along that edge. I wasn't going to betray either one. I would serve both exceptionally well, while ensuring my own interests were protected in ways they couldn't imagine yet. By Sunday night, I had 2 separate contracts finalized. The Helix one stipulated I would only work remotely, with limited on-site appearances. The Meridian contract carefully outlined consultation on industry best practices without specifically mentioning Helix. Both contracts included language about my ownership of any processes or tools I developed. On Monday morning, my first official day as the founder and CEO of Nexus Integration Solutions, I sat at our dining room table, my new office, with my laptop open, wearing a blouse I'd ironed for the first time in weeks. Chris paused on his way out to a physical therapy shift. "You sure about this?" he asked. I nodded, though my stomach was churning with doubt. First payment from Helix should hit our account by noon, $40,000. He let out a long breath. And if they realize they're paying you to work for their competitor? I'm not working for their competitor. I'm consulting for 2 separate clients on non-overlapping projects. I looked him in the eye. I've reviewed the contracts a dozen times. Everything I'm doing is legal and ethical. Maybe not completely ethical, a small voice whispered, but I silenced it. When Chris left, I closed my eyes for a moment, gathering myself. Then I dialed into the Helix emergency meeting about Metacore. The integration pathway is fundamentally flawed. I explained to the team of engineers who'd been flailing for weeks. Your architecture assumes a linear patient data model, but Metacore uses a networked model with branching relational elements. That's not what our analysis showed, stammered Raj, the interim director they'd appointed. Your analysis missed key structural elements in their legacy system, I said, not unkindly but firmly. I've outlined the necessary adjustments here. I shared my screen, showing the revised architecture I'd spent the weekend developing. There was silence as they absorbed what I'd presented. This will require rebuilding half the integration layer, one engineer finally said. Yes, I agreed, but it's the only way to make the migration work within Metacore's timeline. How did you identify this so quickly? Raj asked, a note of suspicion in his voice. I've handled 3 similar migrations. This pattern is something you learn to recognize. What I didn't say, I'd already spotted this issue during my interviews with Marcus months ago. I'd mentioned it as a potential concern. No one had listened. By Wednesday, I had both companies dependent on my expertise. Helix's team was implementing my redesign for Metacore. Meridian was crafting a new business strategy based on my insights about healthcare data, architecture trends, insights that would position them to capture clients dissatisfied with Helix's services. At home, things were starting to heal. With the first payment from Helix, we'd caught up on bills. Chris found a physical therapy practice interested in bringing him on as a partner rather than an employee, a better opportunity than he'd had in Portland. Noah still barely spoke to me, but I'd seen him looking at me differently when I was on video calls, commanding respect from executives at companies that had once intimidated me. Ellie crawled into my lap one evening as I was reviewing code. "Are you the boss now, Mommy?" I smoothed her hair. "I guess I am, sweetheart." "Good," she said firmly, "because you're smarter than all of them." 2 weeks into my contracts, the inevitable happened. James Alderson requested an urgent call. Mrs. Mercer, Leanne, we have a situation, he began, his voice tight. It's come to our attention that you may be consulting for Meridian Health Systems concurrently with your work for us. I'd prepared for this moment. That's correct, I said calmly. Nexus Integration Solutions has multiple clients in the healthcare sector. This represents a clear conflict of interest. No, it doesn't, I interrupted. My contract with Helix specifically addresses this. Section 7.3 states that I may provide services to other clients, including competitors, provided I maintain confidentiality of proprietary information. I've adhered to that completely. The intent is clearly spelled out in the language your legal team approved, I said. If you're concerned about the arrangement, you're welcome to terminate our contract. Of course, the initial payment is non-refundable, and you'd still need to resolve the Medicare issues within the next 4 weeks. Silence stretched between us. We both knew he had no choice. The Medicare deadline was immovable, and I was more than halfway through implementing a solution no one else on his team fully understood yet. I want daily progress reports, he finally said. As specified in the contract, I agreed pleasantly. After hanging up, I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. I'd stood my ground. I hadn't raised my voice or shown anger. I'd simply refused to be intimidated. My phone buzzed with a text from Daria at Meridian. Heard Alderson called you. Everything okay? The healthcare industry in Raleigh was smaller than it appeared, apparently. Everything's fine, I replied. Still on for tomorrow's strategy session. 3 weeks later, I delivered the completed Medicare integration architecture to Helix, 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The migration test ran perfectly. The Medicare executives were so impressed they increased their contract value with Helix by 30%. James Alderson called me personally. The board is extremely pleased with the outcome, he said, sounding like the words cost him physically. We'd like to discuss retaining Nexus for ongoing support. I'd be happy to send over our standard long-term contract, I said. My rates have adjusted based on market demand. I named a figure 20% higher than my crisis rate. He didn't even blink. Draw up the paperwork. 2 days later, I finalized my strategic roadmap presentation for Meridian. Daria was ecstatic. This positions us perfectly to expand into exactly the market segments where Helix is vulnerable, she said. The board wants to offer you an exclusive contract. I appreciate that, I said, but Nexus's business model depends on working with multiple clients across the industry. I'm happy to prioritize Meridian's projects, but I can't accept exclusivity. She studied me through the video call. You're consulting for Helix long-term now, aren't you? I smiled. My client list is confidential, as you know. Clever, she said with a small laugh. Very clever. 6 months after Helix had callously cut me loose, my consulting firm had 5 employee specialists I'd worked with over the years, who were eager to join a company that valued their expertise properly. We had contracts with 7 major healthcare systems, including both Helix and Meridian. We'd moved from our rental into a house we'd purchased in a good school district. Ellie had the support she needed. Noah had made friends on the high school track team. Chris was thriving in his new practice. And me? I was working harder than I ever had, but on my terms, no one could fire me. No one could uproot my family on a whim. I had built something unbreakable from the ruins of what Helix had destroyed. One rainy Tuesday, I received a calendar invitation from James Alderson. Quarterly business review, it said. Standard for our ongoing relationship. What wasn't standard was the location. A coffee shop downtown, not Helix headquarters or a video call. I arrived 5 minutes early, ordered a cappuccino, and chose a table with a clear view of the door. James walked in looking distinctly uncomfortable outside the corporate environment, his tailored suit at odds with the casual setting. Thank you for meeting me, he said after ordering his own coffee. I wanted to discuss something off the record. Go ahead, I said, wariness creeping in. He took a deep breath. I'm leaving Helix. The board has asked me to step down. I kept my face neutral, though surprise rippled through me. I'm sorry to hear that. He shook his head. Don't be. It's been coming since the Medicare crisis. The truth is, The company has been mismanaged for years. Cutting you was just one symptom of a deeper problem. Why are you telling me this? He looked me straight in the eye. Because the board is considering offering you the CTO position. I nearly choked on my coffee. Excuse me? You've demonstrated exceptional technical leadership. The entire integration division now runs on your architecture. The board recognizes that letting you go was a catastrophic error. The irony was so perfect, I almost laughed. I'm not interested in being an employee again, James. Nexus is profitable and growing. They're prepared to acquire Nexus, he said. Full valuation plus a 3-year leadership contract for you at double your current consulting rates. Now I did laugh. A soft, disbelieving sound. They want to buy the company they inadvertently created when they fired me. He had the grace to look ashamed. Essentially, yes. I took a slow sip of my coffee, thinking of all the sleepless nights, the tears, the devastation their careless decision had caused my family. And now they wanted to throw money at the problem to buy back not just my expertise, but my loyalty. Please tell the board I'm flattered by their interest, I said carefully. But Nexus isn't for sale. Not to Helix, not to anyone. They'll offer more, he warned. It's not about the money, I replied. It's about never again putting my family's security in someone else's hands. He nodded slowly. I understand. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. He hesitated. And I owe you an apology. What happened to you and your family? It was unconscionable. I should have intervened. Yes, I agreed. You should have. We finished our coffee with talk of industry trends and mutual connections. As we were leaving, he paused at the door. One more thing you should know. Meridian is also preparing an acquisition offer for Nexus. I smiled. I'm aware. His eyebrows rose. And? They'll receive the same answer. Nexus remains independent. Walking to my car, I felt a sense of completion washing over me. This hadn't been about revenge, not really. It had been about rebuilding, not just my career or my family's stability, but my own sense of power and agency. 3 weeks later, I signed a joint venture agreement with a small but innovative health tech startup founded by 3 women who'd faced similar corporate betrayals. Together, we launched a platform that would help hospitals manage patient data more effectively than either Helix or Meridian could offer. Medicor was our first client. Helix's second biggest client was our second. The day we announced the venture, I received a text from Marcus, my former recruiter at Helix. Saw the news. Poetic justice. Proud of you. I didn't respond. I didn't need his approval anymore. That evening, I sat on our back deck watching Noah and Chris toss a football while Ellie practiced cartwheels in the grass. My phone buzzed with another partnership inquiry from a hospital system looking to escape their contract with Helix. Everything okay? Chris called, noticing me looking at my phone. Everything's perfect, I said, setting the phone aside. And for the first time in a very long time, I meant it. The company that thought I was disposable had created their own most formidable competitor. The job they'd taken from me had forced me to create something far more valuable. The security they'd stolen from my family had been replaced by something no one could ever take away. That wasn't revenge. That was justice. And justice, I discovered, tastes sweeter than revenge ever could. Have you ever been betrayed by a company you trusted? How did you rebuild afterward? Would you have handled things differently than I did? Sometimes our greatest strengths emerge only after we've been broken apart and have to reassemble ourselves. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and share your own corporate horror stories in the comments below. Remember, the best revenge isn't about destroying others. It's about building yourself into someone they can't ignore and can never control again.